Imagine the King of England in the dead of night, alone in his private study at Clarence House, pen in hand, signing away his wife's most cherished lever of power. No fanfare, no announcement, just a single document that erased Queen Camilla's iron grip over who enters the palace gates. But why now? What explosive secret pushed Charles to this ruthless act? And what did Camilla do to lose everything she once controlled? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. King Charles had been retreating into solitude far more often in those tense months, frail yet strangely resolute after his brutal health battles had stripped away any illusion of endless time. He would sit for hours in quiet reflection, eyes fixed on faded memories of a past he could never fully escape, while Camilla's laughter drifted through the distant corridors like a reminder of the life they had built together. In that heavy silence, the king confronted a truth he could no longer ignore. The woman he loved had grown too powerful, and the monarchy itself was paying the price. For years, Queen Camilla had exercised an unspoken but utterly ironclad authority that insiders simply called the veto right. With a single quiet word, she could blackball any staff member who displeased her, install loyalists from her own trusted circle, and reshape the entire royal household exactly as she saw fit. No one dared challenge it. Her influence had become the invisible backbone of palace life, silent, absolute, and unchallenged, until the night everything changed. Alone with only the weight of his crown for company, Charles finally lifted the pen. His hand trembled for the briefest moment as memories of recent betrayals flooded back, a staff loyalty scandal so personal and so damaging that it had shattered the last fragile layer of trust between husband and wife. Then, with a decisive stroke, he signed the secret order that stripped her of every last veto right over palace personnel. The ink had barely dried when a trusted aide slipped the sealed envelope into the hands of the master of the household at first light. Shock rippled outward like cracks across ice. Senior staff froze mid-conversation, eyes wide with disbelief as the document passed from hand to hand. Whispers turned to gasps. The carefully balanced world they had known for years was suddenly tilting on its axis. Who would now decide who stayed and who was quietly removed? The palace, once Camilla's carefully curated domain, was about to feel the cold wind of change. Even as the order began its quiet journey through the corridors, Camilla's morning routine was about to be shattered in the most humiliating way possible. The doors and decisions she had once commanded with effortless certainty would soon slam shut against her influence, a silent declaration that her reign over the household staff had ended, without warning or mercy. Deep inside Charles, a fierce inner conflict raged like a storm he could barely contain. His profound love for Camilla collided head-on with his unbreakable duty to protect the institution he had waited a lifetime to lead. He knew this single act would wound her to the core, yet he saw no other path forward if the monarchy was to survive what he now viewed as her dangerous overreach. The trigger had been one recent betrayal, involving staff loyalty that cut far too close to the throne, a hidden fracture so explosive it finally broke the king's patience after decades of quiet compromise and painful silence. In that moment of signing, Charles had chosen the crown over everything else, and the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. But this wasn't born in a vacuum. To understand why Charles would risk open war with the woman he fought decades to marry, we must go back to the shadows where Camilla first seized this power and the slow poison it injected into the marriage. For years, Queen Camilla wasn't just the king's wife, she was the unseen architect of Buckingham Palace's inner world. With a single word, she could hire, fire, promote, or exile anyone who served the royals. Staff trembled at her disapproval. Favourites rose overnight. How did the once scorned mistress transform into this untouchable power broker, and what dark bargains did she make to keep it? It all began in the years after 2005, when Camilla quietly began her masterstroke. No grand announcements, no dramatic power grabs, just careful, calculated moves. One by one, she placed her most trusted allies into key household positions. What started as gentle suggestions soon became iron law. Those who understood the game knew better than to resist. Camilla was building something far more dangerous than a simple support system. She was constructing her own invisible empire inside the monarchy. Her power operated through what staff came to fear most: the veto. It was never written down, never officially acknowledged, yet it was absolute. A quiet recommendation from Camilla carried the weight of a royal command. One raised eyebrow, one softly spoken doubt about someone's loyalty, and careers vanished overnight. Loyal aides who had served the royals faithfully for decades suddenly found themselves dismissed for the smallest perceived slight, a wrong tone, a glance that lingered too long, or simply being too close to the wrong royal. In their place rose her chosen circle, people whose first loyalty was not to the crown, but to her. The reach of this network was breathtaking. From the elegant ladies-in-waiting who controlled access to the Queen, to the security teams who knew every movement, from communications officers who shaped public messages, to even the kitchen staff who prepared every private meal. Loyalty flowed straight back to Camilla. Whispers spread through the palace that her own children and extended family were receiving special treatment, with positions quietly created or protected under her watchful eye. What looked like a harmonious royal household from the outside was slowly becoming something far more dangerous, a parallel court where Camilla reigned supreme. Meanwhile, King Charles grew increasingly isolated in his own home. As her influence expanded unchecked, he found himself surrounded by faces chosen not by him, but by the woman he loved. Conversations became guarded. Decisions that should have been his alone now carried her unmistakable shadow. The man who had waited so long for the throne began to feel like a guest in his own kingdom, watching from the sidelines as Camilla tightened her grip on the daily machinery of monarchy. Yet Camilla justified every move with chilling conviction. In her mind, she wasn't seizing power, she was protecting Charles from hostile elements, from those she believed wanted to undermine their hard-won happiness. She saw herself as the fierce guardian of their future, but for many inside the palace walls, the fear was very different. They spoke in hushed tones of a dangerous new reality, a parallel court where one woman's word could override tradition, protocol, and even the king's own wishes. The tension was building quietly, like poison moving through veins. And then came the cracks. Yet even empires built in shadows have cracks. As Camilla tightened her hold, resentment simmered among those she overlooked, and one fateful incident would hand Charles the evidence he needed to act. It started with a leaked memo, a careless whisper in a corridor, and ended with King Charles staring at proof that the woman he loved had crossed an unforgivable line. A senior staffer, once Camilla's closest confidant, turned whistleblower, revealing how veto rights were allegedly abused to silence critics and reward loyalty to her alone. The revelation hit Charles like a dagger. His queen had built a fortress around him, and he was on the outside. The breaking point arrived without mercy. In a hidden recording, captured during what should have been a routine discussion, Camilla's voice cut through the air like ice. She was vetoing an appointment closely aligned with Prince William, blocking a trusted figure who dared question her growing circle. The words were calm, controlled, yet laced with finality. No room for debate, no appeal. That single moment exposed everything. It wasn't protection, it was control. Absolute and chilling. Charles sat alone in the dead of night. The evidence spread before him under dim lamplight. Tears burned in his eyes, mixing with a rage so deep it threatened to consume him. How had the woman he had sacrificed everything for turned their shared dream into her private kingdom? Memories flooded back in merciless waves, those heated private rows behind closed doors, voices rising in the quiet hours. Camilla had always defended her actions with fierce conviction, insisting every veto was necessary to safeguard the crown from hostile forces. "I'm doing this for us," she would declare, her eyes flashing with the same passion that once drew him to her. But now those words rang hollow. The fortress she had built wasn't shielding their marriage. It was walling him out, isolating him from his own heirs, his own legacy. The whistleblower's torment only deepened the wound. Once Camilla's most trusted ally, this senior staffer had wrestled with unbearable loyalty torn between queen and king. Sleepless nights of moral agony had finally pushed them to act, leaking the proof that could destroy everything. Their betrayal carried the heavy price of guilt, Yet they saw no other choice if the monarchy was to survive. Charles barely slept in the days that followed. He paced through endless nights, love for Camilla clashing violently against duty to the institution he was born to protect. Every memory of their long, defiant journey together now felt tainted. The laughter, the stolen moments, the decades of waiting, all of it weighed against the cold realization that her power had grown too vast, too dangerous. In those dark hours, the decision crystallized with terrifying clarity. No aides, no counsel. Charles drafted the secret order himself, his hand steady despite the storm inside. The wording was ruthless, merciless in its precision, total revocation of every veto right, no exceptions, no appeal. When he finally set the pen down, the document felt like both salvation and a death sentence for the life they had known. The weight of that signature hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Everything was about to shatter. The palace that had once bent to Camilla's will was now on the brink of open war, and no one inside its walls would escape unscathed. With pen to paper, Charles changed everything. But signing was only the beginning. The real storm erupted when the order reached the palace corridors. Dawn broke over Buckingham Palace like any other, until a sealed envelope arrived at the private secretary's office. Inside, King Charles' signature on a decree that ripped away Queen Camilla's most potent weapon. Staff froze mid-task. Whispers turned to gasps. In minutes, the household fractured, some celebrating in secret, others terrified of what came next. This was no routine memo. This was revolution from the throne itself. The envelope slammed onto the private secretary's desk like a live grenade. An aide's hands shook so violently he could barely break the seal, his pulse hammering as the king's signature came into view. He read the words aloud in a voice thick with disbelief, each syllable slicing through the stunned silence. Total revocation, every veto power erased without mercy. Senior staff crowded around, faces draining of color, overlapping questions exploding in chaotic bursts. "She has nothing left," one gasped. "Who decides staff now? Who fires? Who hires?" The power vacuum hit instantly and mercilessly. Years of Camilla's iron control vanished in a single stroke, leaving the entire household spinning in freefall. No chain of command, no clear authority, just raw uncertainty ripping through every corridor like wildfire. Panic spread faster than any memo ever could. Longtime Camilla loyalists felt the ground vanish beneath them. They huddled in tight knots, voices frantic and overlapping, faces pale with raw terror. Their protected world built on her favor. Her quiet approvals had been shattered overnight. Some clutched each other in silent horror, tears welling as they realized their careers now hung by a thread. Others whispered desperate plans, already sensing the coming purge. In stark contrast, a few staff who had suffered under her rule exchanged secret, breathless glances of relief, though even they kept their joy locked tight behind fear of retaliation. The palace, once a machine of perfect order, descended into pure disorder. Doors slamming, hurried footsteps echoing, alliances fracturing in real time as everyone scrambled to pick a side. Then the blow landed on Camilla herself. She strode toward her usual morning briefing room, expecting the deference she had commanded for years, only to find the door locked against her. A trembling aide blocked her path, eyes averted, muttering the unthinkable. "New orders, Your Majesty," direct from the king, denied entry to the space she had once ruled without question. The humiliation crashed over her like a tidal wave. The woman who had shaped the household to her exact will now stood powerless outside her own domain, blindsided and burning with rage. From his isolated vantage at Clarence House, King Charles absorbed the fallout in heavy silence. Reports trickled in like wounds, each one pressing harder on his already burdened heart. He had acted to protect the crown, yet the suffering now rippling through the palace and through the woman he still loved left him more alone than ever, torn between cold duty and aching regret. The revolution had begun. Sides were forming in the shadows. Fear and fragile hope clashed everywhere, and no one inside those walls could escape the storm. Camilla, blindsided and humiliated, didn't stay silent. Her response would ignite the most explosive confrontation the palace had seen in decades. Queen Camilla doesn't cry in public, but behind closed doors. The woman who waited 35 years for her crown unleashed a storm of rage. "How dare he?" she reportedly hissed, slamming doors as aides scattered. This wasn't just loss of power, it was betrayal by the man who swore eternal love. What followed was a private war of words, ultimatums, and threats that nearly tore their marriage apart forever. The moment the news of the order crashed over her, Camilla's world ignited. She burst into their private apartments like a tempest finally breaking free, her voice cracking through the furred, heavy silence with thunderous force. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, tears of pure fury and heartbreak streaming down her face as she faced Charles head-on. The confrontation erupted instantly, raw and unrelenting, voices rising to shattering levels in a tearful screaming match that shook the very foundations of everything they had built. "After everything I sacrificed, after decades of standing by you through the worst scandals the world could throw at us." Her accusations flew like daggers, sharpened by years of hidden pain. She called him ungrateful, weak, and worst of all, manipulated by his own son. "William has turned you against me. You're letting your heir pull the strings like a puppet while you destroy the one person who truly loved you." Those words cut deeper than any blade, because they dragged their entire forbidden love story into the light in brutal, flashing contrast. Camilla hurled reminders of the stolen nights, the public humiliation she had endured for him, the long agonizing decades she waited in the shadows, while the world condemned her. The passion that once defied an entire kingdom now twisted into this devastating agony. The same man who had risked everything for her was now stripping away the only real authority she had ever claimed as her own. Charles tried to respond, his voice steady at first, but the raw emotion in her eyes made his own heart crack wide open. Yet even as the pain flooded him, his resolve began to harden, like steel forged in fire. He refused to back down, insisting this was bigger than their marriage, bigger than either of them, and that the crown itself demanded it. The more she pushed, the more immovable he became, a chilling shift that only fueled her volcanic rage. But Camilla refused to break quietly. In the hours that followed the screaming, her sharp mind turned cold and calculating amid the chaos. She launched her counter-moves from the shadows, reaching out urgently to her most loyal staff through secret calls and whispered meetings, rallying them with promises of protection and shared fury. Subtle sabotage began immediately. Key documents mysteriously delayed, private meetings rescheduled without warning, quiet resistance planted wherever her influence still lingered like embers refusing to die. She was fighting for her survival with every weapon left, her heartbreak twisting into a fierce determination that made the palace corridors feel even more dangerous. The emotional toll ravaged them both. Between the explosive shouts and the desperate plotting, fleeting moments of raw vulnerability surfaced, memories of their once unbreakable bond, clashing violently with the betrayal now tearing them apart. Charles saw the same eyes that had looked at him with love for over 30 years now, filled with devastation. Yet he stood firm, believing he was saving the monarchy from collapse. The argument reached its most terrifying peak when Camilla, voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper, trembling with desperation, hinted at the ultimate threat. "If you force me into this corner," she warned, "I won't stay silent forever. The world will hear every detail of our private war." The implication of a public scandal hung between them like deadly poison. One wrong step, and everything they had fought for could explode into the open. Their marriage, the ultimate story of redemption after decades of sacrifice and scandal, now dangled on the absolute brink of destruction, hearts shattered and trust in ruins. As the marriage teetered on collapse, a new player entered the fray, one whose silence had been deafening until now. Prince William never liked Camilla. Now, with his father king, he saw opportunity. Insiders claimed the prince quietly fed Charles the evidence that triggered the Secret et order, positioning himself as protector of the monarchy's future. Was this filial duty, or a cold power play to sideline his stepmother before his own reign? The distrust had been simmering for years, a slow-burning fire William kept carefully hidden behind his composed public smile. He had watched Camilla's influence grow like ivy choking an ancient oak, wrapping tighter around his father until the king seemed almost unrecognizable. Long before the secret order was even imagined, William had begun to see her not as a loving stepmother, but as a threat to the very future he was destined to inherit. That quiet resentment finally found its moment when Charles ascended the throne. Opportunity knocked, and William answered with the precision of a chess master, moving pieces across a board no one else could fully see. In discreet, carefully chosen meetings away from prying eyes, William began gathering intelligence from staff who had grown weary of Camilla's iron rule. He listened to their hushed confessions, their fears of sudden exile, their stories of loyalty twisted into something darker. These disaffected voices became his silent allies, feeding him fragments of proof that painted a damning picture of overreach. He didn't rush, he didn't confront. Instead, he curated the evidence with cold calculation, ensuring every detail would strike at the exact moment his father's doubts were deepest. When the time came, William offered his strategic counsel in private conversations that carried the weight of legacy itself. "This isn't personal, Father," he reportedly urged. "Frame it as institutional reform. Protect the crown before it's too late." His words were measured, respectful, yet laced with the unmistakable suggestion that Charles' hesitation could doom the monarchy William would one day lead. Camilla, however, was no fool. As the chaos from the order unfolded, her sharp instincts quickly turned toward her stepson. In the heat of their explosive arguments, she hurled the accusation with venomous certainty. "William had orchestrated everything. He's been waiting for this chance to push me aside," she raged, convinced the prince had masterminded the betrayal to clear his path to power. The family fracture deepened into something raw and irreversible. While William worked behind the scenes, Kate stood quietly by Charles's side, offering her measured support in ways that spoke volumes without a single public word. Her calm presence only heightened the divide, turning what should have been a united front into a silent battlefield of loyalties. Yet beneath the surface calculations, darker tensions loomed. William's moves carried the shadow of succession itself. By helping strip Camilla of her veto rights, he wasn't just aiding his father, he was reshaping the palace power structure in preparation for his own reign. Would Charles see the protective son or the ambitious heir? The question hung like a blade over every interaction, foreshadowing conflicts that could one day tear the royal family even further apart. William played the long game with chilling patience, every discreet step designed to secure the future while the present burned around them. The family war had escalated far beyond husband and wife. Alliances were shifting in the shadows, and the consequences were spreading like cracks through glass ready to shatter the entire household. But the order's fallout spread beyond family, rippling into the very staff whose lives it upended. Overnight, palace corridors became battlegrounds. Camilla loyalis, Chié whispered mutiny. Others celebrated newfound freedom. Resignations loomed, morale plummeted, yet some staff faced impossible choices. Obey the new regime or risk their careers forever. One veteran butler summed it up. "We served the crown, not one person. But now, whose crown is it?" The order had torn the household apart in a single devastating stroke. No one knew who held the power anymore. Who approved the shift changes? Who signed off on new hires? Or quietly removed those who had fallen from favor? The chain of command that had run so smoothly under Camilla's iron hand had vanished, leaving a terrifying vacuum where every decision felt like walking through a minefield. In the kitchens, in the communications offices, in the private apartments, staff moved with hunched shoulders and darting eyes, whispering the same desperate question in every corner. What happens to us now? The emotional toll cut deep and personal. Long-serving aides who had once thrived under Camilla's protection now found themselves torn in two. Some wept in quiet corners, loyalty to the Queen clashing violently with their sworn duty to the King. One young lady in waiting, voice trembling with raw pain, confessed she felt like an orphan caught between warring parents. Others made the agonizing choice to defect, slipping away to align themselves with the new reality before it was too late. Their guilt heavy as they abandoned the woman who had once elevated them. The contrast was heartbreaking. Loyalists who had enjoyed years of favor now faced sudden exile, while those who had suffered silent humiliation under the old regime dared to breathe freely for the first time in years. In the shadows, pro-Camilla factions began to plot. Secret meetings convened in unused offices, and late-night texts flew between trusted allies, their voices low and urgent as they schemed ways to resist, to delay, undermine the changes before they became permanent. Mutiny hung in the air like smoke, thick and dangerous. They spoke of protecting their queen, of buying time until she could reclaim what had been stolen from her. The tension was electric, every conversation laced with the fear of being overheard and the thrill of defiance. Yet King Charles refused to let the palace descend into total chaos. From his quiet distance, he made personal interventions that carried surprising warmth. He reached out to key staff with private calls and handwritten notes, offering reassurance in his calm, measured tone. "The crown remains the same," he told them. "We serve the institution, not any one voice." Those words brought temporary calm to some, but they could not erase the deeper fracture. Meanwhile, a subtle power realignment was already underway. Staff aligned with William began rising quietly into influential roles, their steady presence reshaping the daily rhythm of palace life, while Camilla's inner circle watched with growing dread. Beneath it all, suspense thickened like gathering storm clouds. Rumors of leaks to the press began circulating in hushed tones. Someone, somewhere, was talking. A single misplaced word, a bitter confession, and the entire secret war could spill into the open. The staff lived on a knife edge, knowing that one betrayal could bring the full weight of public scrutiny crashing down on them all. The palace was trembling from within, its ancient walls hiding a battlefield of broken loyalties and uncertain futures. And while the outside world continued its blissful ignorance, the pressure inside was building to an unbearable point. As the palace trembled, the outside world remained blissfully ignorant until one crack in the wall threatened to bring it all crashing down. Secrets this big can't stay buried forever. A single photo, a whispered tip to a tabloid, and suddenly the world knows King Charles has stripped his queen of her last real power. Headlines explode, social media erupts. Public divided between poor Camilla and finally. What follows is the monarchy's greatest test since the Diana era. Will they survive the exposure? Or has Charles just lit the fuse on the end of their reign? The leak struck like lightning in the dead of night, a blurred photograph of the sealed order, snapped by a nervous staffer's phone, and passed through a single anonymous contact, slipped past the palace walls, and landed in the eager hands of a major tabloid. Within hours, the story detonated across every front page and every screen. King Charles strips Camilla of all staff power in secret coup, screamed the headlines. Social media caught fire instantly. Hashtags trended worldwide as millions weighed in, some flooding comment sections with sympathy for the Queen, who had waited so long only to be humiliated. Others cheering with savage delight that the once scorned mistress had finally been put in her place. Memes multiplied like wildfire, cruel cartoons and savage edits spreading faster than any official statement could hope to contain. Petitions demanding transparency rocketed into the hundreds of thousands, while royal watchers around the globe held their breath at the sheer scale of the scandal. Inside the palace, the fallout was immediate and devastating. Camilla's carefully constructed public facade began to crack under the relentless glare. For the first time in years, she appeared visibly shaken during a scheduled engagement. Her smile tight, and her eyes hollow as cameras captured every micro-expression of pain. Behind closed doors, her rage had not cooled. If anything, the exposure only sharpened it into something colder and more dangerous. She moved through the days like a wounded lioness, every step heavy with the knowledge that the world now saw her stripped of the one quiet power she had claimed as her own. King Charles, rarely one to speak publicly on private matters, was forced to break his silence. In a carefully worded but unmistakably pained statement, he addressed the nation with quiet defiance. The monarchy must evolve to serve its people and preserve its future, he said, his voice steady yet carrying the unmistakable weight of personal cost. The words were measured, institutional, but those closest to him heard the tremor beneath them. The king, who had acted to protect the crown, now watched his marriage strain under the blinding spotlight he himself had helped ignite. The long-term consequences rolled through the palace like aftershocks. Staff changes accelerated at dizzying speed. Loyalists to Camilla found themselves quietly reassigned or encouraged to retire, while those aligned with the new order rose swiftly into vacated roles. The household that had once operated under her invisible hand now realigned itself around a different center of gravity, leaving deep scars and lingering distrust. Meanwhile, the marriage that had survived decades of scandal now hung by the thinnest of threads. Private arguments continued behind reinforced doors, love and resentment colliding with exhausting frequency, as both Charles and Camilla struggled to find a path forward through the wreckage. Yet even as the dust seemed to settle, a final chilling twist lingered just out of sight. Insiders whispered that Camilla was not finished. Whispers spoke of quiet meetings, carefully worded messages, and a calculated calm that suggested she was weighing her next move with deadly precision. Would she choose retreat, accepting the diminished role with graceful silence? Or would revenge burn hotter than ever, driving her toward one last explosive confrontation that could shake the monarchy to its core? The palace stood divided, the public remained obsessed, and the future of the crown balanced on a knife edge no one could predict. The secret order had changed everything, but the story was far from over. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.